Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode of Hudson County Review Live. I am your host, the most charismatic, diplomatic, enigmatic host this side of the Hudson, and once again we're joined with the Vice Chair of the Hudson County Board of Chosen Freeholders from Jersey City, Bill O'Dea. Bill, great to have you back.
Always a pleasure.
So, Bill, obviously the big topic in the county since the middle of the summer has been this contract with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement regarding detainees at the Hudson County Correctional Facility in Kearney. Obviously, you wanted to move to a larger venue, and that didn't work out at the previous meeting. So just tell us your feelings on that and why you felt this larger venue was the right way to go.
Well, I guess I got to take a step back first to look at what happened in July. It just has a bad optic. You know, it was a daytime meeting in the summer. There were legitimate questions about the contract. A member of the board, and I supported Joel, asked for a copy of the contract. Hours before the meeting or the night before, they said, well, there is no contract. It's the same old contract, which raised further issues in my mind because the old contract doesn't require the 2011 standards, which includes additional recreation time, better medical care, and a couple of other issues, which was all the more reason to carry the item for discussion. On Tuesday, we carry the item. On Thursday, it's voted to be put back on. Individuals were not aware that it was going to go back on the agenda. So from the public perception, it looks like a fast one was pulled over on them. Again, I don't think anyone acted maliciously, but the reality is that's the perception, and I think that we need to undo that. So in an effort to undo that, having spoke to many of the advocates and individuals concerned about this issue, they were like, look, when it comes September and there's a night meeting, we really want to have a full hearing on this issue. We expect a lot of individuals to be there. In anticipation of that, I asked the board, can we just move it to a larger venue? When I initially spoke to some of the members of the board, they didn't have a problem with that. Once again, come Thursday, put the item up, and as you know, the item was defeated. Raises a concern. The concern is that come September 13th, I don't believe it's possible that this chambers will be able to hold the large crowd. If that occurs, what kind of legal issues are we creating? Will our entire agenda potentially be subject to be thrown out in court? Those are issues that haven't been addressed yet. As it relates to the ICE contract, I think that, now at least we're getting everybody dug in to look at it, to look at what options are. Obviously, there are people that want us to get out in 60 days. I don't think that's a practical solution. I favor a phase-out over a reasonable period. Could be 12 months, 16 months, maybe as far as 24 months, so we don't impact the individuals that are currently there and impact their lives. But as part of that, we have to create a formula, which we would call the no-profit formula, which is to create a reasonable way of determining what dollars are excess revenue, and then finding a way that those dollars have to be directed into improving the facility in a manner which helps the detainees in a pro rata share, but the additional dollars directly benefiting the detainees, whether it's to give them additional money in their commissary or some particular services or programs for them, or additional legal services, or maybe, as Freeholder Torres and I spoke about, creating an Office of Immigrant Assistance for Hudson County.
All right. So obviously, there's a lot to this. It's not an open and shut case, clearly. But one thing that I think a lot of people have put out there to me and to the elected officials has been, how much is this contract actually? And I mean, I asked that question to the chairman of the board, Anthony Veneri, and he said it was difficult to calculate. It's $120 per detainee from ICE. I mean, per day. So have you heard otherwise, an extrapolation of what this could be, or is that accurate that there just is no estimate right now?
Well, you can always estimate it. The reality is you don't have a fixed population.
Yeah.
So you could have, at one time they had 800. Now I believe they're down to 650. And God only knows with Donald Trump, you could have 1,200 if we allow it to just go unvetted. But the reality of their estimates are the revenues have increased over the last 3 years from about 20 million to 23 million, and the projection for this year is somewhere between 27 and 29 million dollars. So that's raw revenue. Then you have fixed costs, and those are fixed costs directly related to staffing, feeding, providing medical care to the detainees. That cost number, based on the the number of detainees that are estimated to be there on a daily basis comes out to be between 17 and 18 million. That relieves about 11 to 12 million. In looking at what excess revenue would be, it's reasonable to say that, okay, if you're in a building and you've got to pay your utility costs, and 60% of the people in the building are detainees, then it's fair to say that 60% of the cost of the utilities should be attributed to the detainees. Similarly, if you've got to pay rent, or in this case pay debt service on improvements to the facility, that 60% of that revenue or that cost should be attributed to the revenue for the detainees. When you take those two items for this current year, and that would change every year, you're about $3.5 to $3.8 million estimated of what I would call excess revenue. And that's the money I'm talking about wanting to put back into either additional programs, commissary, legal services, maybe an Office of Immigrant Assistance. And that's kind of a discussion that we've started in recent weeks, and started with the immigrants, probably immigrant advocates, about 2 months ago.
Okay, that's much appreciated clarity on the financials. So just rewinding just a slight bit, at that meeting where getting the larger venue was voted down by the majority of the board, you got a little angry, and you said that anyone that didn't vote for the contract lacked courage, and you gave a long speech about why you felt that way, and some people didn't appreciate that, some of your colleagues. So, I mean, why did you think it was really important to get that on the record?
Well, again, to go back to what I stated earlier, I think that from the public's perspective, what happened in July is pretty egregious. It looks like it was a, thought out process. If you go back in May, there's a routing form from Ron Edwards, who's the director, routing this item to go on an agenda. Mm-hmm. There are 2 meetings in June. What are those meetings, John? Night meetings. The item wasn't on either of those meetings. Raises suspicions. Did somebody consciously say, hey, we don't want to put that on a night meeting, let's wait and put it on a day meeting? It gets put on a day meeting. Then when we have a day meeting, reasonable request to just carry it one meeting. You've been here. 99% of requests to carry an item for one meeting is just done as a normal course of action. There was no emergency to pass this. The contract expired in December. If there was an emergency, someone needs to explain to me, how did we operate from January 1st till July 11th with no contract? We didn't extend the contract. The contract expired.
Right.
So were we illegally holding detainees for a 6-month period of time? No one's answered that question. My guess is that since we weren't, there was no problem in carrying this item for one more meeting. So that, in my mind, created the issue that made people angry. If they're angry, the first step of trying to mend fences and solve a problem is to allow those individuals to express their thoughts and feelings. Having a meeting in a larger vendor to accommodate them. When I was a counselor, I sat till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We used to go out, leave the meeting and go to breakfast. Glenn Cunningham, God rest his soul, Tom Frashone, we would go out, after the meeting because they'd run that late. That comes with the job. Right. It's not our job to figure out how can we always get out of here as quick as we can. How can we make sure people don't speak as much as they can? How do we have as few people speak as possible? I don't think when we sign up for this job, that's part of the job. And that's what I think, that was the frustrations I think I was expressed at that meeting. And look, I personally apologized at that meeting, and I would do it publicly again, to Freeholder Cifelli. I think he took it to heart. It wasn't meant to be taken to heart that much. And Al's been very helpful and diplomatic in trying to figure out how do we come up with a long-term solution to the problem with ICE.
Okay. And as you also probably
saw,
Al,
I apologize to you again.
Very cordial of you. And as you also saw when I spoke with Chairman Veneri, he disagreed on that point because he said, I voted in public session in front of a full freeholder chambers. I explained my vote. So if I lack courage, I would have done this behind closed doors, or I would have moved it, or finagled it where I didn't have to explain myself or people didn't have to see me. And he said, I did it right out in the open. So therefore, I think the claim was not justified.
But again, it was a day meeting. It was a day meeting where the item didn't appear on the agenda. Go back to the meeting. It appears on the meeting agenda on Tuesday. The meeting agenda on Thursday, the item doesn't appear. As a number of advocates said, we called up and said, hey, the item's not on your agenda anymore.
Well, just to clarify, his comment was in regard to the vote on the larger venue on August 9th, I believe.
Oh, but so he voted in public, but again, his vote at the end of the day creates a scenario where 100 or more individuals may potentially be denied the right on September 13th to come and speak at a meeting. That I won't mention which freeholder, but one of the freeholders was like, Billy, I'm not going to vote for this, so 300 people can just come, knock my jock off for several hours because I voted for it. Now, I respect that freeholder's opinion.
It's a pretty honest answer.
But that kind of got me upset too, because that's what we get elected for. Sometimes we have to vote on things that aren't popular, and it's not that we just vote on them here and then go motion to adjourn and leave. We have to then allow the public to come and express their feelings.
Right.
And I would tell you, throughout my career, and with these gray hairs, it's been a pretty long career.
It's been a few years, yeah.
It's been a few years. There are often good input that we get from the public. The idea of this nonprofit concept is very much comes out of the thoughts of advocates. I remember when the one individual was here, I believe it was from Hoboken, before the July 11th meeting, and the item was discussed. And I said, and I tried to explain to him, which is something that's been advocated by the people that want to keep ICE here, by the county exec, and they're better here than they would be somewhere else. And I kind of have always been torn with that because I understand that argument. It's a strong argument. And the individual said, but why don't you take the profit out of it? Why don't you take all this money? And in one of the discussions, I would say, well, what do you want us to do? Take less money and give the money back to Trump? And they're like, oh, I don't know. and then we've kind of, from that, tried to put this together, the idea of how do we take those excess revenue dollars and make the lives of the individuals that are there as detainees better. Give them maybe a better chance to get out if there's a legal way to have them to be released. And I think that's a positive discussion that we're, as a whole, trying to move into. And that came out because we allowed people to speak at a meeting.
Well, Fiona, I'm glad you bring that point up because, some of your colleagues and other elected officials have said a lot of people are approaching this from an angry, jaded perspective, Trump this and Trump that. Then the argument has been made, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump per se, because, this is how Hudson County is going to operate as a business, because as every governmental body at the end of the day is a business. And, this is a contract that's been on the books for 20 years. And if you take the emotions out of it, nothing's really changed. Obviously, you don't exactly agree with that, but you've heard this perspective, and I'm sure you have an opinion on it.
Well, you can't say nothing's changed. The number of detainees in the facility has grown exponentially over the last few years. On the one point in time in July, there were 400 inmates and 800 detainees. That means there are twice as many detainees as there were inmates. If you go back in time, not only were those raw numbers never close to that, but those percentages. What is that? Why is that? Because unlike past administrations, Trump is rounding up individuals, separating parents from their children. And we have to look ourselves in the eye and say, do we want to be part of promoting that? Do we want to make that easier for Donald Trump to do? As you know, and I just had a meeting, was part of a meeting with the county exec and several freeholders.
Yep.
Currently, of the 800 individuals that are, it's probably 650 or so now.
Call it 700, whatever it is right this second.
How many do you think are from Hudson County?
So we're going with the 700 number, I don't know, 300?
10.
10.
So today, there are 700 detainees there. 10 of them are Hudson County residents. So we're right now in the business of taking detainees from other places. 90% of them are coming from New York. Why do you think we're taking 90% of them from New York?
Because they don't have a facility in New York?
Because they refuse to, well, yes, you're kind of correct. They don't have a facility. They refuse to take them. The city of New York is not going to cooperate, even places in Long Island. They're not cooperating. They would not allow to take part of their facilities for detainees. So that's the business that we're in. I don't think that's a good business. And again, in saying that, I'm not saying we get out of that business tomorrow, because I'm conscious of those individuals there. I'm concerned about, I've spoken to many of them. I've been, just in the last month, two visits to the facility, sat down and talked to detainees. You know, I don't want them to be relocated far away. I think that's not going to happen. I think they're probably going to wind up going to Essex.
So if all these detainees end up going to Essex, of course, just a hypothetical, but we do know they have a similar program right now. I mean, is that really definitively better or worse than keeping them in Hudson?
I don't think it's. It's not necessarily better or worse. I think the answer, though, is when you're fighting a war, and in this case, this war of Trump's immigration policy, you either have to be for it or you have to be against it. And if you want to be for it, you're an enabler. And I think that's the decision we have to make. And you know, I'm trying to be fair and reasonable in the discussions with the administration. So many of the individuals that are brought in have other things besides detainee for immigration. They have criminal charges pending in New York City. So they, like others, would maybe be in a correctional facility under any circumstances. But there are individuals, there are women there that are simply, you know, they went and picked up the husband because he had a charge. While they were there, they went and said, "Let me see your papers," like something out of, back in World War II in places like Germany. "Let me see your papers." "Oh, you're not here legally. Take her in too." When we were there, we had the instance of one gentleman had a court case. They showed up at his house the day of the court case at 6:30 in the morning. They took him out. They took his brother out and his uncle out. His brother and uncle just had expired visas. There's an individual there that was here on a work visa for 10 years. He screwed up. He didn't get his work visa extended. His CDL license. He showed me his CDL license because his visa had expired, his work visa. He's sitting there now. He's been sitting there for about 5 months. That's the face of the reality of what it is, and I think that we need to, in a fair, reasonable, rational way, get out of that. Because right now, we're supporting a policy that we don't agree with. You can't stand up and pass a resolution saying, "We oppose Donald Trump's policy on immigration." I bet you if I put that resolution up, I'd get 9 votes for it. But even though we oppose it, we're going to make money off of the business of it. It's just not right.
So if we step into a time machine, which we obviously can't do yet,
Right.
But, hypothetically, go back 20 years when this contract first came in, as luck may have it, you were still on the board, you were still sitting on the dais right over there, and you were one of the people that voted for the contract. Obviously, Donald Trump's just a New York businessman at that time, has no indications of being involved in politics, and it's a totally different climate. But at the time, why do you think the board considered that a good thing for the county?
Well, I think there wasn't a huge discussion of it. There wasn't many advocates that had come out and thought about it or spoke about it. And I think for the most part, the policy there were really taking individuals that had other legal issues, criminal issues, but they happened to be held on detainee charges, and they were taken. I also think that if we go back in that time machine and we look at who the population of was brought in, I think they were more local, more North Jersey, not people from New York City. So I think a lot of things were changing, but I think the bottom line is there wasn't a big discussion of it. It hadn't become the big issue it was. The whole issue of immigration in this country had not reached it's like anything else. Historically, there are many issues that over time, public opinion develops on it. Over time, the atrocities or the wrongs of an issue are brought out. And it's only after that occurs that the public opinion changes, that the issue comes to the forefront, and that policy changes have to be made.
All right. So one more question on this policy-focused discussion here. So, as you know, 287G was a problem, and advocates, they were aggressively...
I was one of the biggest aggressive ones to end that.
Which I was going to note.
Oh. I noted first.
But thanks for jumping
Sorry,
in.
Your Highness.
You're forgiven. All's forgiven. But, my question on that was, do you think that a lot of these advocates felt that they didn't get full government transparency on that issue, which is why they're amping up the aggression and the relentlessness, if you will, on this particular issue.
No, I think that though there is some differing of opinions within the advocacy group, I mean, their position is a very strong position on immigration in general. 287G is the most egregious from their perspective because literally, I mean, you are conspiring at that point, your law enforcement with Trump's ICE officers to take people in. And if you look at the last year that we were in 287G, while we thought we were operating under the Obama rules, the reality is that there are individuals that were possession of marijuana. They were brought into the jail on possession of marijuana, and the next thing you know, ICE is notified and they're taken in on a detainee, as a detainee and held, whether they were held here or held in the facility in Elizabeth. So the truth is, we were able to show by getting that information that we were not operating. I don't think anyone was maliciously doing it. I don't think that the director or the county executive knew anything about it, but there were individuals that worked at that facility that were doing referrals to ICE that were the Trump policy, not the Obama policy. So that those advocates were pretty they were on the money when it came to that issue. But within that group, many of them have the same feelings. They feel, that some of them have the feeling you should let everybody in. Right. That's probably not practical either, to let the borders open. But, even within the practical ones, that individuals that are here, that have expired visas and, there should be a rational policy that with bail reform, if there's an individual whose visa expired or work visa expired, why can't we, while we try to legally resolve their case, see if we can let them stay here, give them a pathway to citizenship? Why can't they be released on a bracelet program the way we release so many individuals charged with actual, in some cases, fairly serious crimes, the same opportunity?
And we know on that point, there has been a number of national Democrats that have come out and said that they support an abolish ICE movement. Would you say that's something you think is a reasonable initiative to be a part of?
Yeah, I think so. I think abolishing ICE makes sense. I think, again, you can't abolish it tomorrow.
Of course.
You have to lay out a plan over a few years to do it and do it the right way. Because if you just abolish something overnight, when you go from one extreme to another, you don't solve a problem, you just create another one. But yeah, I think that developing a strategy to get rid of ICE makes sense. And again, individuals that come to this country that don't come here legally, that break the law, the system is there. The system should still be there for them to be prosecuted, and then after they're prosecuted, to be deported back to their country.
All right.
I tell you, when we were there one day, there was one individual at the place that just wants to go back.
This is the August 14th visit, the recent one?
Yeah, they just want to go back. They're like, can I just go back? they're not understanding why they signed the paper to go back, and they're still being held here. Because at least if they go back to their country, they're not going to be held like a prisoner anymore. They'll be able to go work. They'll be able to send money to family members that might be here legally. So, that's a whole other part of the discussion that nobody's really talked about.
Interesting. Well, all right. I think we really went in depth there. I, of course, want to talk a little politics before we go today. So on June 5th, obviously, Amy DeGees, Jersey City Board of Ed trustee and the daughter of the county executive, was elected the chair of the HCDO. You were supporting State Senator and Union City Mayor Brian Stack. Obviously, it just wasn't in the cards. You guys have had several weeks to, get over it, for lack of a better term. I mean, where do you stand with the HCDO and the leadership there in light of that vote?
First of all, I got over it in about 5 minutes. I gave Amy a hug and a kiss right before it was over. She's a good friend. If you ask her, she'd tell you I'm one of her mentors. So,
okay.
And when I met with her before the vote, I made it clear to her that I had made a commitment to Brian, who I consider a good friend, and I live up to my commitments. Look, the HCDO is the leadership of the party, and we have an election in November. It's going to be a tough election. Bob Menendez is in the fight of his life. Make no mistake about it. I'm a little concerned that we're not, and this is a criticism of anyone in particular, because it should come from the top, meaning the candidate themselves. But I wish we were a little more proactive already. I think we should have been spending this month, the last 2 months of this summer, out registering voters. I think there's 20,000 voters in this county that we could register. If we get 5 of those out to vote for Bob Menendez and 4 other counties do that, that could be the difference in him winning or losing the election. I'm ready, willing, and able. I've spoken to Amy a couple of times. My supporters will be working very hard for the Democratic ticket and working with her. They have an event coming up, I believe September 6th, that I expect to attend. And I've had some of my people helping to raise money for that event. So
All right.
I work within the system. There are times when things happen that, as you see at meetings, cause me to have to go outside the system. But I like to build bridges more than blow bridges up.
Well, that's always a good thing in an elected official. Beyond that, though, like you said, some people got over it in 5 minutes.
Right.
Some people needed a couple days. Others needed a few weeks. But, in a nutshell, it looks like Brian Stack is, on board. People like yourself are on board. One person, though, that has been a question mark is Jersey City Mayor Steven Fulop. Some people question if that relationship, that bridge, as you just said, between Tom DeGees and the mayor could ever reach that point again. What's your feelings on that? Do you think there's any chance he runs a ticket next year?
You never know. You never know. When you talk from today to next June, so many things can happen. To start to handicap 9 months or 10 months from now, you just don't know. Today, the practical look of the land is that's a very difficult thing to do. I don't encourage people to do suicide missions. It's usually not good.
Probably good advice.
When you're young like Steve is, you could probably do a couple of them. But Steve's a smart look. Steve's very smart politically. He's very popular still in Jersey City. Some of the insiders may not like him, but do some polling or just go to a neighborhood and just talk to people. He's pretty popular. But he's also pretty practical. So if there are not things really literally lined up to have a real legitimate battle, I think people should try to negotiate things instead of battling anyway. I don't think that he's ultimately going to run a ticket for what? For committee people. I think we could sit down and come to a reasonable way of it, making sure that all the current committee people for the HCDO who ran last time should be allowed to run in the line next year. If Amy took the position that isn't the case, then I would have a problem with that. But I think that's a reasonable, and time heals all wounds. There's a lot of issues going on. I'm sure Tom and Steve could sit down and have a cup of coffee. They'd want to make sure somebody else made the coffee. but they wouldn't want one. They wouldn't go to one house or the other. They'd be switching the cups maybe if they did that. But no, I think that you never know. We should hope. We have a lot of things that we should try to work with together, and let's see what happens.
And Freeholder, let me end on this note. As everybody watching probably knows, as we touched on for a moment, you've been a county official for a long time now, and ever since I started doing this, which is a little over 7 years, probably longer than that, people have been saying you're going to be the mayor, you're going to be the county executive, and obviously you've remained a freeholder and you seem to be enjoying it. But what's next for Bill O'Dea in that political sphere?
I wait for the good Lord to come and give me the direction. I don't really know. Look, I love being a freeholder. I have a lot of fun, as you see, with it.
Yes.
And I get a lot of stuff done. If I wasn't able to get a lot of positive things done, like in recent years, I feel I've been able to, even working with the administration, I would go do something else. But if the right opportunity comes along, I'll take it. If not, I'll do this for a few more years. I'll go watch Little League. Watch my grandson play Little League baseball or football. It's more like you've seen him.
Yes.
He's more like a football player than a baseball player.
Big kid.
But I keep having fun, and I keep doing good things for the people. That's what I like to do. And like I said, if the right opportunity is there, I trim down 35 pounds. I'm in shape. I'm always ready. Like a fighter, man. Wait for the fight. Just wait for the call. You're like in a heavyweight match, like the one guy, the last minute, like Rocky. The guy gets
injured,
knocked injured, and then he needs somebody. I'm in shape. I'm ready. So I'll leave it on that note.
A very pleasant note to leave it on, if I do say so myself.
Always a pleasure.
Freeholder Bill O'Dea,
Ryan.
an exceptional pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in once again. Have a fantastic weekend.